Do you want an army led by a bear or a Battletech mech? Well, I think it's time to talk about how to get into Kosmoflot. Hey guys, it's Ryan, and this week it's a purchase guide for Kosmoflot because I think more people need to get into the best Ariadna army, in my opinion. This week we'll talk about the structure of this video, what I recommend, what's nice to have, and what you can skip due to cost or being a bit crap. Now, this is liable to change, and if it does, I might redo this later into the edition, but for now, these are my opinions on what to buy in Kosmoflot. If you like them, feel free to like the video and subscribe below, as it really helps out. And now, let's get into the video. This is my maybe 6th purchase guide video, but this one is going to be no different. What I'm going to do is to go through most, if not all, boxes available in the faction, in this case Kosmoflot, and I will make some recommendations to you and tell you what I think is worth it. Generally, good ways to get started with an army as a first or second army. I usually break this down to recommendations, a sort of bare minimum you kind of need for not a competitive but a very spirited 300 point list. The nice to have, the cool stuff, the flavour, the variety that spices your life, and then the feel free to skips. The buy it if you really, really want it because it's not great in game or not that great in value. While Kosmoflot and Ariadna might be in a bit of a rut, it is worth saying that rules are temporary, cool models are forever. As such, it's your hobby, your time, your money, so if you see something and go, hot damn that rocks, then buy it and you'll make it work in lists. Ariadna does have some challenges compared to other armies. We can't really share that many models with other factions. Usually I'm like, oh, Silhouette 3 models can be shared if you already have some, but we don't get those in Ariadna or Kosmoflot. We do get a Silhouette 7 tag, so if you already have one, great, that's a proxy. We do get the Silhouette 1 helper bots as well, which is nice if you want to share them, if you have them. However, Ariadna has a very cool and distinctive theme that may make you want to not proxy, since it's so unique to the rest of the game. Anyway, more relevant to the video, I'm going to assume you're okay with loadout proxying. If not, Infinity is not the game for you, and I'm going to assume that you're okay with some proxying of actual models, in the short term at least, for some units, as Kosmoflot being a newer faction in the grand scheme of things, is lacking specific loadouts or ways to get things outside of joint boxes. It is also a former Code 1 faction, so some of these boxes might get repacked, but I'll touch on that as we go. Finally, I'm going to do all this in euros, not because I'm Irish, this is a Scottish accent I speak with, but because Corvus Belli is Spanish, and they use that, and that is a good point to work from because it is consistent. All prices are from their website. This can be tweaked locally due to tariffs, import taxes, local conversion rates between euros and whatever else. As such, it's all going to be in euros, and I'll assume you can get a locally 10% discount on your models at your local game stores, which if you really like them, you should shop there. Overall, this is a guide, not a prescription or a rote set of rules to follow. Just see what you think, see what you like, and go with what you like. With that, what do I actually recommend? So the most basic advice for picking a faction you can get beyond picking what is cool is to start with the action pack, and with Kosmoflot that fortunately holds very true. The Ariadna action pack, weirdly, is the one with Wallace in it, by the way. It is formerly Crimson Stone and beyond Crimson Stone, and is a great place to start. For €92.50 you get 10 models, which are 3 Rockhots, 1 SAS, 1 Zenith, 1 Scots Guard, 1 Paracommando, 1 Vocalat, 1 Cosmosoldat, and 1 William Wallace. This maps out to about 242 points WYSIWYG, and that's pretty not bad. This is hugely diverse and can be a solid start for many paths with Ariadna. I don't actually think there's a bad model in this box, with each authoring something with some loadout proxying and much, much more if you're willing to full-on proxy, but we'll get to that in a minute. So the pack gives you 3 of our line troopers and 1 of each loadout, which is nice, but ultimately you're probably going to see play as either 3 SMGs, 1 paramedic or 2 SMGs and a chain rifle loadout. Probably will need a 4th, but that can easily be something from this box like a Paracommando or another model with purity such as the Mechanic or Frontovlik, but those can be proxied from a Scots Guard, Armandino, or just bought separately. 95% of the time, I take them in a core, but I have been seeing them being taken in heresies or even just on their own, which is like 2/3 of the box getting used. If you can find or make a fourth one, you are basically set for them. The SAS is either going to be all your needs or about 50% of them, and to be honest, that's perfect. The SAS is a fantastic skirmisher, brittle, but fantastic, and is your go-to midfield specialist with good CC. The shotgun one isn't the one I use at all. I don't think I've ever taken the non-chain rifle one, other than that time in the bad old days of N3 when they had sniper rifles, but generally this is great to have, and if you want number 2, you have an option I'll get to in a minute. The Scots Guard is a really interesting unit concept, but in terms of actually using them, I rarely do. He doesn't link that well with all those in the box, and solo, possibly as a missile launcher trooper, but his main use while you start out is either a camo ARO or a camo AP Spitfire, or as a soloist, at least for now. What I'd really do with him is to proxy him as the Frontovic AP sniper rifle for your core. That way he gets good use and gives us something unique that we don't have, and that is MSV1. The Zenith is nice and good as just a Cararan proxy, ambush sniper, or chain of command with Wallace as your lieutenant, and is probably worth leaving without proxying, but I don't often take her, or obvious lieutenants, but that's just me, but it is an option and a good supporting piece. Paracommandos are good objective grabbers and side attack pieces in a way that SAS are not, and are a good addition for this box. It helps get your eye in with parachutists, as in Kosmoflot we have a pair that are really good. If you're not feeling like playing Chaos Ganji, then this makes a good rock up proxy if you need a fourth, and it's spec opposy enough that it could work as a second SAS as needed. That French was absolutely fucking atrocious. I'm sorry. The Vocalat is an interesting piece. He's better in N4 in this box, but he's still pretty good. Armed with the HMG, you're looking at a reasonable wildcard, or as he was traditionally linked with a core rockets, proxy him as a missile launcher. If you want to get the most out of him, I would probably proxy him. If not, he's still a good HMG that often finds his way into a list with 2 buzzies buffing him, so it is something worth considering. Good model to have. The Soldat in this instance is actually a bit of an opposite story. Well, he doesn't actually link very well with this box unless you start heavy proxying, so maybe you'll end up running him solo as an absolute tank with armor 6, but only 1 wound and NWI. So in learning games he can be very much used solo to gun things down with a souped up AP HMG, but as you expand, and if you want to run him, and many people do, look at getting him a fire team of something worthwhile like Stranix or a second Soldat, and we'll talk about that later. He's good to have in this box, it's just not entirely synergistic. Finally for the box is Wallace, and he is a cracking piece that can be an active lieutenant or something you want to run up and sock something in the face. He's great at learning with some guardrails what a warband needs to do in Kosmoflot, and as you learn the game, he can become your lieutenant and you can expand into the wonderful world of having an actually good, inspiring leadership LT. Suck it, Joan. I'm surprised it's in this box, but it's actually surprisingly great for starting out. Overall, start with this box and you will not regret it. Usually I tend to give recommendations rather than go pick one, but here I think it's needed. Ariadna is the home of Silhouette 5 and Silhouette 6 big warbands who run up the boards and do murder, and in Kosmoflot we get 2.5. This, despite us having a tag, is our centerpiece model for the faction. This is the bad boy you pop down and your opponent goes, hum, and we have 2.5 options. The Polaris teams, rulers of N4, equipping Mirage 5, the only French unit worth talking about, and the new Kibervolk patrol. The Kibervolk is the half one here. It is not a true super heavy warband like our other dogs, but it can be proxied as one, as Silhouette 5 is the same as Silhouette 6. Base wise, and with the action pack, you'll definitely have a model that could sub in for Margot. Each one's goal is in some form to kick your opponent's arse and leaving your specializing to your SAS or something else, and here it comes down to what is your vibe. Do you find advancing up the board like a traditional warband good for you? Then look to the Bearpod or the Kibervolk. If you prefer the asynchronous engagement of the Paracommando, then equipping Mirage 5 is for you. The Bear is the toughest with Arm 4, 2 wounds and Dogged and 2 nice profiles to make use of, but will be the slowest to get up the board with no impetuous and only 6'4 move. Trust me when I say that is the smallest nitpick I can find. The bear is iconic to Kosmoflot for good reason. He's less good now, but he has taken in a lot of lists, and he just looks cool. He's a werebeard with a grenade hammer. Come on, rule of cool! The controller is now required. She's like a 10-point order, whatever. The Kibbervolk is pretty similar, much less durable, structure over vitality based, and no immunity arm, and only one wound with dogged, with less good CC, but it has better options to set up some nice tricks. The dozer it comes with is nice to have, as it's a cheap package with mines and the option for some turrets to shore up our defences. He can reasonably be proxied in as the Polaris team, and the fast pandas can be used as proxies for helper bots for your Irmandinos or other solo engineers. It doesn't have the oomph of a bear, but it's respectable and much less intensive on points, and if you want to get a more broad experience of Kosmoflot, maybe this is for you. Equipping Mirage 5 is a brick, a scalpel, and Chekhov's gun. It is the bear, but it can appear in your opponent's deployment zone with no orders spent. One is a 2-wound immunity arm werewolf, and the other is a French bit on the side, who in my headcanon is the best non-augmented shooter in the game and our only Silhouette 2 BS14. Between them, they will, given half a chance, a not perfect deployment and a smart play, tear up your opponent's deployment zone or wherever they land. They can cover for each other or do two completely separate things to win the game. They offer a ton of flexibility. Honestly, here, pick your favourite, proxy as the other two as needed until you can buy what else you want, and just have fun with the iconic bits of Ariadna. They are all amazing and all worth it for different reasons. If at a push I was to recommend one, I would personally go with the Polaris team because that's kind of my jam over airborne deployment and lighter models. Varangians or Irmandinos are my next recommendation for what you should pick up next. And yes, it's another split choice, but I promise it's the last one. Both, again, do something very similar, but do it in different ways. Both are 8 to 15 point models, but end up being really nice in Kosmoflot as cheap and cheerful pierces you run up the board and smash stuff. The Irmandinos can do an objective on the way up as well, or have booty to give them sort of more diversity, but that's quite random. They're also a little worse in melee, so they kind of default to their chain rifles a little more, whereas Varangians are more focused on doing direct damage, so it becomes, do you want a jack of all trades warband, or do you want a blunt brick? Irmandinos can also support your other troopers repairing structure units or hackable units if they get hacked. So here it becomes, do you want a sole Varangian for €15.50, or do you want two Irmandinos for €21.50? Which is a choice. I'd go with the Varangian Guard. I like them better than Irmandinos, but Irmandinos do a lot of their jobs and play the objectives, so it really comes down to you. You could also proxy Irmandinos as Varangians if you're not running Irmandinos, so you have options. Now, another thing Kosmoflot needs is skirmishers, and a second SAS, in my opinion, is required, but some people don't use them. However, what people always want to reach for is Usha, our named SAS, and a fantastic piece who can do what an SAS does, but much better. She is a DZ scalpel who can reach out and hamper your opponent as needed. She's also in a lot of lists for good reason, and you should pick her up either to use as an amazing piece or to proxy as a second SAS. She has two sculpts to pick from, each representing one of her profiles, but honestly, just pick what one you like. I'm a big fan of Knifey McGee, so I'm going to recommend that one, but both cost €15.50, so that's entirely up to you. Finally, I'm going to recommend the Kosmoflot support pack. It edges out over the patchers for being a little more useful for the action pack for proxy ability, link ability, and the bots are pretty cute and useful. The mechanic can be a good dozer proxy or be good defense in a rocket core, with Purity fixing up your heavy infantry, or maybe to pretend to be a Stranic who he himself is a wildcard. AVA2 doctors / specialists, that is the cheapest way to get yourself a Harris for your soldat. Kind of the main reason why I actually picked this box. The two bots also do push it into the recommendations, as with Irmandinos, they become the best way to heal your soldat or tag or give them burst 2 and melee for 2 points. They can also act as pilots for the Chernobog. Yes, the box is a little pricier at €49.50, but most other factions are getting their support packs are usually like a half decade old at the youngest, so no repacks to really sort of drive this price down. It's pretty useful to have just to use the models as proxies, and they will help make a list. If you wanted to skip this and get the patchers, then that probably would also be fine. So I wanted to make a quick list from the recommended stuff, and you can kind of see it now. And I went with the Armandinos as a player's team as sort of what I would pick of those options. But it wouldn't take much to swap this list around for equipping Mirage 5 or the Kibbervolk, and hot damn, there's actually a ton in this list. A full 5-man core with level 4 purity with ARO and attack pieces, a lone Wallace non-LT to run up and smash, 2 SASs for the mission, the Polaris team to run in and do damage, the Armandino to help keep the that going and be a threat in melee, a Harris with a burst 4.5 HMG with arm 6. Yeah, it's a lot to learn, but it basically covers all your bases. This is a total of 217 of the finest Spanish euros, and that's pretty reasonable with 17 models available for usage, and to be honest, minimal proxying. I also checked, equipping Mirage 5 is another 10 euros, and the Kibbervolk a near 10 or more than that. So this is almost the cheapest way to go about a full 300 point list. I really like this list as well to an extent that I'm like, okay, I changed like 2 things because I have the models, and I've basically run this list, or I can tweak it in a way that it's just really good. As a newer player, there's a lot going on, sure, but it's a great place to learn all these pieces. Armandinos teach you about Impetuous, Bears teach you about moving large models around, the SAS teach you your skirmishers and your opportunism, Wallace teaches you how to move up bulkier, bigger Silhouette 2 models and make good use of smoke. The Vocalat and the Frontovlik can help you understand how defensive and offensive AROs can work. There are just so many options. Let's talk actual models though. Unlike military orders, there are only 4 proxies, and that is really nice and easy to learn. We have the Scots Guard here, pretending to be the Frontovlik AP sniper rifle, which is fair, they're both similarly built and have longish looking guns, so that's pretty close to perfect. The Stranic boarding shotgun is going to be the Paracommando, standing as he basically has the Breaver gear, similar to a Stranic, if less bulky, but given how in the fluff that lone Stranics work, then it kind of makes sense to look a little different. Usha is standing in for our second SAS, mostly because points, but swapping her back in is recommended every now and then. And finally is the War Core, and I think I'm just going to let the Zenit pretend to be a War Core. Overall, for 217 euros, this is a pretty good set of models that can easily take you from 150 points to 300 points and give you leg room to proxy things such as equipping Mirage 5, Catarans, different warband characters that you can then inform what you want, and then you can tweak this list and go out and buy them. This also lets you play with slight tweaking and proxying 2 lists at 300 points, which is enough for maybe not the most competitive tournament list, but you can definitely wet your beak in the competitive play. Now, what's next? This section, as mentioned in the beginning, is the variety and where a lot of the spice comes into your list. And we have some crackers. First up, I always do this, is the tag option. The Chernobog is our big, stompy, Battletech, catapult-esque tag, and it's pretty good. It shows up regularly, and it is a great way to give huge list varieties. Now, you don't need to look at the heavy infantry, and you can leave it to the lighter lads to move around this imposing beast. It is €48.50, which is largely fine for a tag, not as cheap as the later Silhouette 6 Seocast tags, but it is, in short, fucking huge. Its torso is nearly big as the Mark II, I think. Like, if you stuck the red-eye wings on it and swap out the legs for a flight stand, it would still be the largest flyer, and it is as tall as the red eye is long. It is also incredibly fun to run, as it does something nothing else in Kosmoflot really does, and that is being 3 wounds, BS-14, and an AP HMG just to decimate what it comes in contact with in a way that bears just simply don't. It is a fun game where the bear advances. The bear is also a huge ass model under the fire of the truly big Silhouette 7 main battle tag. It should be Silhouette 8, not going to lie. It's a great new way for Ard, and it's a good model to proxy for other Silhouette 7 tags if you want to expand, but I like it and it's top of my nice to have. Patchers are cracking profiles as well as wildcarding cheap 2 wounds, yes, hackable, heavy infantry with a penchant for fire and mobility despite being 4-4 and looking like it's about goddamn time. Patchers are great wildcards, adding bulky bodyguards to Rockot teams or generally any Harris. They are pricey at €43, but they are only just Silhouette 2 models, which is a downside, but they have much better wildcarding duties as your Stranic, and they're very good at doing objectives when needed. In terms of useful pieces to have, they are pretty solid and great enablers. Plus they look cool. Pick them up if you want more variety and bulk in your lists. If you want more bulk but would rather warband, then it's time to get that second dog, or rather one of the two options I mentioned earlier. But now you've had some time and practice with one, you might be wanting a second to come in a DZ or be a cheaper and faster dog who isn't as tough or iconic. Now is a good time. You've had some games, you're thinking, what's next? Maybe you're now going, I want to win a tournament. Well, good luck. A lot of lists I'm seeing doing well in the top 8 are usually the bear in Equipping Mirage 5, but locally, one with a Kibbervolk or maybe even 2 bears is not a bad shout, and certainly won't be a bad idea. If you push me for a preference, I say now's the time to pick up Equipping Mirage 5 to complement the bear. Not a big fan of the box of the Kibbervolk, and it's kind of a little redundant after getting the Kosmoflot support pack, and it's a bit pricey. Models are fine, but 1 Silhouette 5, 1 Silhouette 2, and 2 Silhouette 1/token mines. So it's good, and if you want the models, then get it. But in the meantime, I'm using old Caledonia models anyway. Anyway, a second dog warrior is going to be a great thing to have to paint up and to throw at your opponents. Now is also the time to pick up your second warband from the recommended. If you got a Varangian Guard, it's about time to get Ermendinos for some variety, and vice versa. I leave this to you, but it's also now a good time to get them and build up your warbands. Additionally, if you only have one Varangian Guard, maybe a second one might also be good now. The expansion pack beta, or the box with the Unknown Ranger in it, is nice to have, but with 2 caveats. That it's a Code 1 box, so could be repackaged at any time, and it's only got 1 Kosmoflot unit in it. If you look at it, it's got the Chasseur and the Scout. If you look at the Chasseur and Scout and go, damn, that's 2 fine proxies for X and Y, then grand. Then grab this box, as the Unknown Ranger is a really good wildcard gun and it can fill a lot of holes in Kosmoflot. Not as good these days, but I'm struggling not to run him with 2 Varangian Guards. I know it's not N4 anymore, but he can fit alongside my tag list, and trust me, that makes me want them. He is good at guns, as mentioned, but also at missions with an anti-material CCW. He's a specialist with Wit 13, and he's just nice to have. The Chasseur is a good light infantry or another Stranic model as well, or he can be a superior skirmisher and pretend to be an SAS proxy, but it does look more like a command model, so I'm not really sure here. Maybe you can venture into vanilla with this box, but it's a hit or miss and is only riding high because of the Unknown Ranger. The Strelok, or Scout, I'm not really sure at this point, however, does look fantastic and is a great Pavel or SAS proxy if you ignore the weapon. He is threatening enough with a more obvious, less camo-y paint job that he could be a Varangian Guard or an Ermendino. For 2 proxies and 1 character, €38 is a lot, but this is a good deal if that's exactly what you need. Catarans, my beloved, are really cheap and effective ambushers. I love to include them and make people pucker their butts as a T2 round slams into their heavy infantry. I like them. I have the old ones, but this new one is pretty good. It's a little pricey for €18.50, but it's a nice piece to have. You do have some proxy options available, but a second sniper model isn't the worst idea. She is pretty good and a recent sculpt. Not a fan of the base, but it's a separate piece, so you can make your own like my 2. Overall, ask yourself, do you want a Scottish sniper who is a nice little piece to spice up a list? If so, pick it up because it's funny when you turn your opponent's 1-wound models into pink mist. Psh! The Kosmoflot expansion pack alpha gives us some much loved profiles for the Soldat, Vokalat and Paracommando. My main issue with this box, and I'll get it out the road now, is that the Paracommando and Vokalat, I don't really think you need a second one of these models these days. And with loadout proxying doubly so. However, there are some situations where this is not really an issue. The Vokalat missile launcher, I think, is our maybe second or third best aero piece behind or next to the Pack Soldat, which is the one you get in this box, and the Frontovlik Sniper. Considering both are veteran and MSV1, Warhorse, that is not a bad place to sit. 2 Vokalats isn't a bad idea. I've seen 1 or 2 lists with that. Considering myself sometimes you just need more immunity armor in your life. But sometimes it's also nice to have a WYSIWYG model. The Power Commando, I've tried the AP Spitfire profile once or twice, and it is nice. Limited by only being a parachutist, but it's still pretty nice and might be worth picking up, as if, like me, you dislike the Unknown Ranger model and you want an alternative, then I think this is probably the model for you. You stick a 3D printed shield on it and you're done. If not, you want a second parachutist, which I think Kosmoflot can support, then that is also a good tactic to fake out equipping Mirage 5. Finally is the portable autocannon Cosmosoldat, the beefy boy with the tank destroyer gun. It is a really nice model to have, and I think generally there is a good conversation on do you want the AP HMG or the PAC MSV1. And it comes down to attack and defense. It's a shame we don't get a T2 rifle version festooned with gear, but I will take it. What we have here as two sold out models is probably a recommendation for how Kosmoflot is currently being played, and such. This is a very good box if you want to get more WYSIWYG options or proxy options or both. It's just generally a fairly useful box. So these next three are nice to have, and I've lumped them together because they cannot currently be bought, which is a shame given how useful they are. Or rather, how useful Wolfgang is and how kind of nice the other two are. Wolfgang was out as a solo box at the end of the Ariadne Code 1 cycle last edition and has since vanished without a repack, which is odd and a shame because he got really good this edition. The cracking and continuous damage multi-rifle immunity arm and potentially the best melee in Kosmoflot, only hampered by his ability to only link with rockets. You think you know how to put him in a list. If you have a game plan, go for it. To be honest, I can't not recommend his profile. I haven't run him yet personally, but I think he could do work if you can just get him into or past the midfield. Cadian is in a similar state. Released as part of Code 1 Dire Foes Against Jazz, this has also mysteriously vanished with no repack. Cadian is less good than Wolf, but I really like him. He chews through most heavy infantry like their butter, and he is a child who has gotten into the fridge. If you're wanting a melee powerhouse that can wildcard, he is for you, but I think the Unknown Ranger and Wolfgang, and even Wallace, kind of eats up a lot of his space. If you want a buddy for your Cherno or your single or duo soldat, then maybe he is the one for you. If you can find it, then the Defiant Sculpt is potentially one of my favourite sculpts in Infinity, although it is probably becoming rarer by the day. Finally, for the little out of production useful 3 is the 112 motorized or the Doctor cycle, which I see often showing up in tournament lists, and personally really like as a fast, non-impetuous specialist who can do a lot of work despite being 19 points. It is no longer available and only lastly available in a frankly bad box with a Kazakh Doctor and a Dozer. It is kind of hard to get. If you can find it, pick it up and try if you can handle the bigger bases and not very many guns. If not, skip it or proxy it. If they do come back, they're probably going to be about usual characters and usual bike prices, so keep that in mind. If you can find a good deal on eBay, snag them if you can. If you can't find them, then buy your favourite proxy or use Wallace for the 2 Wolvers and a hack bike for the 112. Finally, for the nice to have is a War Core. I haven't taken them much this edition, but with Wallace's inspiring leadership and the fact they are only 3 points, there is a good reason to take this cheap and cheerful ARO/irregular piece. It is either €14.50 or €15.50 depending on the sculpt. The cheaper one being more fitting for ad, but for media accuracy being the Robot Reporter 2. It is cheap point wise, but also can be proxied if you ignore guns, so it's nice to have but not required. Now, most things here you can skip, largely because you probably won't use the model, but again, if you want it or you think you'll use it, then pick them up. There are a few here that are stinkers in terms of price, so I don't recommend them at all. The War Driver is here for the former and not the latter. I reckon you pick him up, the solo one, for the price of €14.50 over the 38 points of the reinforcement pack that offers nothing to Kosmoflot. It's a cool model, but you only really need it for like 1 or 2 missions, and Kosmoflot and ARG are generally the exception to the you need a hacker for a tag list, as if our tag goes road, you kind of just bear it. It's a nice model, but you probably could use the Power Commando as a proxy. Scott/Frontovliks are in an odd place. I have them in the feel free to skip, which again is because of the former option. I just don't think you run them that much, but I think that is vaguely changing on at least the Scots Guard as the edition goes on. I feel like most people only really need one Scot and one Frontovlik, as I don't think you'll realistically be running duos or Harrises of them, particularly because the Frontovlik is only availability 1 in a Rocket core. If you do need more, you do have other medium infantry looking models like the Zenith, who you could probably proxy in as a Frontovlik. And you have the Scots Guard from the original box, so you don't need to buy the Scots Guard boxes for that one Scots Guard. As such, I don't think you'll need 3 more Scots Guard for €36 and 4 Frontovliks for €38. Now, I am seeing people discuss more the possibility of using Scots Guards, particularly the specialist ones, and the missile launcher one is a good fake out, and so it's a little more worthwhile in my opinion, and they do look good and they make decent proxies. So, okay, maybe pick up the Scots Guard if you want them, but I won't, and I love the Scots. If it gets a glow up, you'll see me bump this up to the nice to have, but until then, probably not. Frontovliks are definitely one that you kind of only really need one of. I think the AP Sniper is the best, and the Heavy Rocket Launcher you definitely could consider, but the other two, the AP Spitfire and the T2 Rifle, is kind of okay. You can take them, but unless you play TAC, you could skip them or use them as proxies, or have your third option for an Unknown Ranger. The T2 Rifle could be an engineer or paramedic to join the Soldat, or the ARO guns can join the Rockets. It's a tricky one. You only need one, so feel free to skip, but if not, maybe get it. If you're a TAC player, this is entirely a different story though. I don't know TAC. Speaking of TAC, Pavel, you can skip him. He's overcosted and does feck all despite being good in melee. Frenzy in the Ochotnik makes him an expensive missile that is kind of not worth it. He is only €16.50, which is cheaper than the Cataran and therefore is a reasonable proxy for your first or second Cataran since they are availability too. As such, skip unless you like Cossack Scottish dudes. Okay, Dima is here because the pack you get him in is not at all good for us. So unless you go hard into proxying, we can only use one model from the Aftermath part, and that is €65, which is far too much for one actually good model and 4 proxies. If you play Bakunin, Tunguska, or an NA2, then this box is better, but for purely Kosmoflot, nah, it's not good. Proxy Wallace as Dima or find a random warband to use as Dima because it will be better value. Take that €65 and go play a vanilla or something. The Ariadne support pack is another stinker with 2 useless models in the Kazakh Doctor, a profile I think is actively the worst in Kosmoflot, and the 112 on foot, who is not bad but unlinkable and at least has style over the Kazakh Doctor. And then the only okay model in it is a Dozer, but you can get an engineering model in like 3 different ways, one in the Kibbervolt packs. Just skip this box. Finally, I get to talk about our, and in my opinion, absolutely worst value model in Infinity, and that is the Tractor Mule pack. For a whopping 65 of the finest Spanish euros, you can get 2 of the oldest models in the Infinity catalogue that will give you, at absolute most, 28 points. Not even 10% of the list. Not only are they old, they do look okay, but they are overcosted and in dire need of a resculpt, which I can only hope is coming this month at Gen Con or sometime in the future. Mules are okay in a list. They're bad TR bots, but they're still TR bots. If you want them, then go buy the Vishtil or some other faction Silhouette 4 box because they'll be about half the price and better value. The Vishtil can also be run in vanilla or attack, so I think it's worth considering if you want to move into them. But for Kosmoflot, yeah, you do kind of want mules at some point, but wait for cheaper resculpts or buy a different model. I actively do not recommend buying this box. It looks cool, but I would rather you didn't spend 2/3 of an action pack on 2 models that on average will not even be 10% of your list. So that was my video on a purchase guide for Kosmoflot. I hope this helped you decide on how to get into what is still a great army and filled with stunning and iconic models. If you found this useful, let me know in the comments below, and if you want more remember to like and subscribe for more because it really helps me out. Anyway, and as always, thank you so much for watching.